Hi, my name is Maria Horat, and I'm a concerned citizen here in Northern California in the Sierra Foothills area. And here in Tuolumne County, there is a small but growing group of concerned citizens who are extremely worried about what's taking place with this latest attack on our freedom, which is something called the climate action plan that the Board of Supervisors is wanting to implement in our county. I'm originally from Venezuela. I have been living here in the US for all my adult life. And I've seen aspects of these tyrannical efforts taking place over there, where it was a very prosperous country for some time, and then it turned into a communist regime, totally destroyed. So today I'm joined by Marc Malone, and he's an English-born American philosopher, entrepreneur, political activist, and counter-theorist on the science of social engineering, founder of America 21, an anti-globalist organization that seeks to undo UN initiatives that erode basic rights and return state and national sovereignty to the people. Thank you, Marc, for joining us today.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate you. And it's very interesting that you come from Venezuela, because often people in America don't really realize what they have, right? And then sometimes an outsider coming in can see it more, because that's often how I feel too, even though I come from what was a relatively free country for most of my life up until recently. But when you come in, you can kind of see clearly, it's just like, wait a minute, this is crazy. This is supposed to be the bastion of freedom for the world. And now I'm coming in, I'm seeing it going like everywhere else. So I think it's a good perspective you have.
And definitely here in California, of course, a lot of people think we have no hope here, but I like to think that the more we get involved, at a local level, we can make a difference and hopefully turn it for the best. Because I believe the greatest problem has been the lack of interest that people have, because they have it, so good. They're not getting involved in what's happening. So Can you light a little bit of common sense on this whole thing? And we need some encouragement here in this part of the world, in California, as to what to do and what the climate action plan is, where it's coming from. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so before I get into it, I want to share some slides with you guys to show you exactly how this works. We've discussed them, and I've discussed them with your group before. Yes. But before I get into it, let me just explain that there is hope anywhere. Anywhere where there's good people, there's hope. This is the important thing to understand, and it's where most of us have gone wrong. I often get criticized by people that are against globalism and the onslaught of totalitarianism that we're seeing. And people often criticize me for saying that, why would you work with any officials, state, county, whatever, city? And I'll always explain to them that there's no problem with any institution. Ultimately, the problem is those that are in the institution, right? Let's look at the founding fathers. So the founding fathers did not tear down the structures that were there. See, Congress already existed. It was created by the English people that were already here. It wasn't created post 1776. What they did is they replaced the people within the system to be a system that is based on America only, as opposed to one that is based on the British Empire. But the institutions, the systems were built by the English people that were already here, who then became Americans. So when we take that same concept, it's important for us to not just want to tear everything down. Often people will say, look, it just got to all come down. But America's never been that. That's not the revolution that we had. The revolution we had was a revolution of changing the way the system works. That type of revelation, I guess it is a revelation in a sense. That type of revolution is really more of a Eastern communist Marxist type revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution, where they tore everything down and murdered 100 million people. And the same in Mao's China, the same in Pol Pot's Cambodia, the same, to be honest, to some degree in the liberal, quote unquote, French Revolution. Right. They tear everything down, they murder a bunch of people, and then they build something new. That's not the Western way. That's not the American way, especially. So what we're trying to do here is completely in line with the law, the real law, the supreme law of the land, which is, of course, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. So what we're doing is just taking the institution that actually works, but just trying to replace people within that institution, because government, a corporation, merely just a vehicle. It is who manages the vehicle that makes it either good or bad. That applies to a gun, that applies to a car, right? If you drive a car with a DUI, you can cause some serious problems. If you drive a car sober, you can go from one destination to the next. So I want to preface what we're going to go through with that the institutions aren't a problem, that they have been subverted and parasited off, and we can solve that problem. A final point would be that even though California is sort of the tip of the spear in the American context for this, it's still further behind a lot of the rest of the Western world. The European Union is way further ahead than California is with this project. And of course, places like China are way further ahead even than the European Union. So important for us to understand that it's not too late. And even if, say, San Francisco, it's too late for, and even if it's too late for Los Angeles, there's a lot of great places in California that are not San Francisco and Los Angeles, even though that they control generally the policy. There are lots of great counties around in all the blue states that have a lot of good people. And then what we're going to essentially trying to do is trying to separate the policies. We're not trying to change San Francisco or Los Angeles because that's a losing battle. Yeah. What we're just trying to say is separate ourselves and say, okay, if San Francisco are going to adopt all this climate policy, and we're going to get into just how dangerous that is, yeah, it doesn't have to affect us. That's essentially our mission here. We're exiting. We're withdrawing ourselves from it. So I hope that makes sense. What I do want to do you have any questions before I jump into this?
No, let's go ahead and jump into it, and then we can go over a few things after that.
Okay. It looks like I can't screen share, but that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain through the process, and then I think I sent you guys the slides anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to describe how this process is going to work, and then we'll look at the climate action and specifically what you guys are dealing with right now. So this is a global governance agenda. Global governance is a very real thing. This is not like a conspiracy. You literally can Google it. Google global governance.
If you want to share, I think we can share. I just changed it to multiple participants.
Oh, okay, got you. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, you can share what you want.
Great. So this is really helpful because I want to explain just very briefly how this all works. So there are three what seem like different things that are actually the same thing. We have the Great Reset, which most people will probably know about. That is an economic transformation of the world based upon climate change. Even, by the way, though it came around during the height of COVID-19, they even said, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab even said, no, climate change is the main driver here. So it's very important to understand this, that climate change is always the main driver. That's why you guys are running up against it right now. And to be honest, everywhere in the world is pretty much. So the Great Reset is an economic driver. Agenda 21 was signed in 1992 by 179 nations, including George H.W. Bush of this nation. And that was basically signed to say, look, through the 21st century, we're going to transform global society. And that transformation is called sustainable development, which you'll find everywhere. You'll find it in your county everywhere. You'll find it in every county pretty much in the world.
The word sustainability is everywhere on this plan. They repeat that word over and over, and nothing can be more unsustainable than the plan that they're putting forward.
Right, yeah, and we'll get to that for sure. So you're not going to see the term Agenda 21 anyway, even though that was the name of the global document agreement that they signed. But you will see sustainable development everywhere, and that's all Agenda 21 means. The document was literally called Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. So Great Reset, Agenda 21, and then Agenda 2030 being the Sustainable Development Goals. So 21 being Sustainable Development Plan, and in 2030 being Sustainable Development Goals, how we're going to achieve the 21st century agenda. All of those three things are the same thing, and they all lead to one primary end: global governance. And again, like, just Google it, you'll find it in the Council on Foreign Relations, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. They do not hide it. I even have a document that I just came across recently that I have PDFs by the Director of National Intelligence of the American Director of National Intelligence, and the document is called Global Governance. So none of this is a quote conspiracy theory. None of this is hidden.
It's information.
Yeah, exactly. The world government is the quote hypothesis conspiracy. There's no evidence of a world government. So we have to be clear about the difference. So why that's very important to understand is because then when we come to what Agenda 21 Sustainable Development actually is, it lays out in the document, and this is the foundation for everything that you're seeing with climate action and everything that we're seeing in the transformation of our counters. Government must be reshaped to the entire process of decision-making must be reshaped in government for economic, social, and environmental issues, socially equitable environmental obviously sound. So basically what they're saying is you could imagine our governments right now operate like a pyramid. And at the top of that pyramid, we have what we call in philosophy an organizing principle. So at the top of the pyramid, the organizing principle basically says, this thing is how we're going to dictate everything else in the pyramid that comes down. So it's a hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy in America, we have the Bible, we have the Bill of Rights. That's the top. And then that kind of informs the rest of the hierarchy, all the way down to the county and individual level. What this basically says is that's being shifted now. The top of that hierarchy, that organizing principle, is no longer going to be the gospel, no longer going to be the Bill of Rights. It's now going to be sustainable development. That's what that means. Yeah. The reason that's in red is because that's what ESG has become. BlackRock and the World Economic Forum's ESG. We can come back to that in a sec. Economics, human settlement zones will be created, geographically and ecologically specific, and ecosystem concerned. This part is extremely important because the human settlement zones are part of this climate action process. What it basically means is that they're going to be moving people. This is literally in the United Nations document. Human settlement zones are basically to move people into major metro areas. So the San Francisco Bay Area will be expanded up to areas like yours if this was to go through. And all the middle of California will be either shifted up north to where you guys are or shifted down south to the LA and Southern California metro area. And that's where they want all the population. And this applies to most states. Agriculture, major groups in decision-making will be involved in agriculture. It's no longer just farmers and trade unions. NGOs will be involved. Business and industry will be involved. Women and youth programs will be involved, all for sustainable agriculture and rural development to set the major objectives for Agenda 21. Basically meaning they're going to control the food, they're going to control the government, they're going to control the economy. That's what this whole plan means. And that is, bearing in mind, this was written in 1992. We are now just starting to see really how far they're willing to go with that. So what Agenda 21 really is, what sustainable development is, what sustainability is, what all of the things we're looking at is the end of national sovereignty, the control of our own money, laws, and borders, the end of privacy, the end of private property rights, and the end of free enterprise. It basically means that we will no longer be able to control our own destiny because that organizing principle I mentioned has now been changed to a different principle, which is sustainability is now going to take precedent, meaning, well, your individual rights are irrelevant because what matters is the planet. Agenda 2030, as I said, is the Sustainable Development Goals. It is the major milestones. That basically means that by 2030, to get us that 21st century plan, they need to achieve a bunch of these things. Those things are very, very similar. So I'll go through this one quickly because it's all the same stuff. By 2030, they want to implement this agenda through a revitalized global partnership, not a national partnership, not a local partnership, global partnership for sustainable development. The red part in stakeholders is very, very important because that basically means the corporate, the BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street type people are going to be involved in the government. That's what stakeholders means. It means your government process is now going to be as controlled by BlackRock as it is by people you vote in. Ending the constitutional republic. Again, organizing principle has changed. Economics means sustainable development will be what drives the economic decisions, no longer the free market, no longer us as people. All countries and all stakeholders, i.e. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, etc., acting in collaborative partnerships will implement this plan. This part is really pernicious, and you being from Venezuela, Maria, will understand just how dark this part is. We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty. We know where that ends, right? We know where that ends. And then the agriculture part, sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resource to take action on climate change. So a lot of the climate action stuff you're seeing, which is all just part of this global plan, as we're going to get to in a second, basically says we have to control the resources. We have to control the food and the economics because you guys are too stupid to know how to do it properly. So we're going to do it. And we're going to do it all in the name of saving the earth. Every dictatorship, every totalitarianism believes that they're saving the earth or saving people from themselves. Okay. So Agenda 2030 is the same thing. It's the end of the free market. It's the end of individual sovereignty. It's the end of national sovereignty. It does mean, and this is, I think, the issue that we're running up to where you live, and in the European Union, they're much, much further along, with the UK slightly behind them. What we're seeing is basically this climate regulation saying if you don't obey, we're going to shut your business down. If you don't obey, you're not going to be able to travel. Well, it's essentially what we saw in 2020 under the guise of a pandemic. But this is much, much bigger and broader, and it has much deeper reach. So let me skip through some of this stuff. These are some of the key players. You have Klaus Schwab saying the Great Reset allows us to reset the world. We have David Rockefeller here, who was the chairman of Chase, who was the one of the founders of the United Nations World Health Organization, etc., saying that they are working on a supranational project, one world, if you will. So it's all in their own books. I have their own books. This is the World Economic Forum own website saying global governance, University of Oxford, strategic intelligence. So this is them basically detailing out why global governance is important. And one of those aspects is we have to weaponize interdependence. That basically means that if one county in California cannot produce its own food, it means they're dependent upon, say, Brazil for food. And then if we make Brazil dependent upon France for wine, and we make France dependent upon China for TVs, well, now everyone's controlled, no one's independent. And that's really always been the purpose of this project. Okay.
Henry Kissinger had a famous quote that he said, he who controls the food supply controls the people. So that's part of the implementation of the plan.
Exactly. And lest we forget that David Rockefeller and his brother Nelson Rockefeller, who really are kind of the purveyors of this whole project, Nelson and David mentored Henry Kissinger, who's a national security advisor, and did much of the foreign policy and the petrodollar and all those things. And Henry Kissinger mentored Klaus Schwab, the president and founder of the World Economic Forum. So you have Rockefeller, Kissinger, Brzezinski, Schwab, and you can see that you're really just looking at one single thread of people. Yeah. So when we look at the global hierarchy implementation structure, this is happening everywhere, not just in your county in California or just one in America. Rockefeller Foundation being at the tip of the spear alongside Bill and Melinda Gates. They then kind of funnel the money and the influence into the UN, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, etc. That comes down to two organizations which will be working in California directly. That will be the New Urban Agenda, which is this idea of funneling everyone up to the two major areas, Northern California, Bay Area, Southern California, LA area, and the United Cities and local governments. So those people, United Cities and local governments, go through all the stuff we just looked through. Most of them won't know most of the stuff we just talked about, obviously, because they don't know how to read it like I do. But they will be taught the basics of Agenda 2030, the whole global project, and they'll be told that it's about saving the earth from climate change. UCLG will then come to your mayors, your city councils, key corporate stakeholders, maybe your local energy company, your local farmers traders union. They will then come and start to train them on the stuff that they have to do to implement this plan. And that's where we then get to that next step where the NGOs like Climate Action come in. But it's the UCLG type NGO that actually comes to your county or your state first to train that out from the global top part we just went through. So then in this instance, this is actually from your guys' area, from your guys' state. So that UN Habitat 3 that I just mentioned, that's the funneling people up to the Bay Area or down to Southern California and making these major metro areas where everyone is pushed out of the rural area and trying to make counties like yours controlled by San Francisco, basically. Well, as we see here, let me see, can't really zoom in. Can I zoom in? Let me have a look. Because if we look here, basically this emission part, and you can see this is the county government, your guys' county government, but basically it says here GHG emissions, or greenhouse gas emissions inventory scopes. This part's really important. You guys have the slides, you can look at the hyperlink here, but it basically says electronics, planes, farms. This is all part of the scope. Now, when we get to the next point, this is going to be particularly scary here, because it just shows Agenda 21 comes through this organization, ICLEI, which is about the same as the UCLG company, all the way down to your local areas. And again, this Plan Bay area is your Northern California Agenda 21 project. This basically means by 2050, really most of it by 2030, is going to be controlled by that one super state. You're going to have like San Francisco Bay Area controlling the entire Northern California region based upon these policies. And the climate action and all these groups are trying to bring you all in to centralize it to one single decision maker. This greenhouse gas emissions part that you can't really see on here very well, I must insist that you guys go look at this, because you will see that they want to cut in half by 2030, electronics, flights, agriculture. They're talking about destroying every part of your life in half. right? I mean, this couldn't be any more serious. This is one of the most serious, if not the most serious things that you will ever face in your lifetime. They're saying that everything you do will have to be cut in half for the good of the planet. That means if you shower, you will now have to shower half the time for half the emissions. It means if you drive, you will have to drive half the time, if you can even afford the gas. It means you will be able to fly once a year instead of twice a year. It means that the food that we eat that is produced will now be cut in half, which means rather than being able to eat meat every day, we'll have to eat it 3 days a week. That is how serious this is. And it's right there in the county government document.
And you know what? We actually brought certain aspects of this plan to the attention of the board and the people. And one of the very small things, we might consider very small in comparison with the big picture, was the issue about the wood stoves that, in essence, they want to ban them. But they're saying that one of the supervisors came forward and said that we are spreading misinformation, that that's not what the plan intends. It intends to replace, it's a policy to replace, among other things, this wood stoves, which, ultimately what's going to happen is that people are not going to be able to use their wood stoves, as happening already in the Bay Area, where they have banned them from new construction.
Exactly.
And restricting the use in several counties. So
yeah, so this is the important point to understand. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is what has made people think that this is all okay. They keep saying, "Don't worry, we have a replacement."
Right.
Don't worry, we're going to cut half. Go ahead.
And how are we supposed to get to 100% zero carbon emissions without banning and getting rid of all these other things that we rely on today? That we have. There's just electricity and solar power for energy, other than and how are we going to have the infrastructure we don't even have nowhere near to be able to sustain?
Well, that's the point. So I studied philosophy of science. What we basically do at Oxford, is we look at the scientific methods that all types of science, be it, we mostly look at physics and mathematics, but it applies very much to chemistry, medicine, whatever. The key thing to understand about science, what separates science from pseudoscience, is a process called falsification. Basically, what it means is we have to try to falsify a theory if it cannot be falsified, right? Like if we test it and it can't be falsified, we haven't been able to show that this theory is false, then it's true. Then we can scale it out. Well, this clean energy thing, this idea of replacing all these things, has never been falsified. It's never been tested to scale. We've never tested it to anything close to 300 million people. We've never tested it for even entire cities in this country or anything like that. We know it's not really possible unless your operation required a lot less people, maybe half the population, then it could possibly work. But here's the thing, whenever they're pressed about this, they never have a suitable answer. They'll never say, "Oh, don't worry, we have a new thing that can come in." So recently something was brought to my attention. They said Elon Musk has a battery that could work, right? That can replace the coal fires. Okay, so do we not think that there's a serious issue with giving someone centralized control of all the energy?
Exactly.
Do we not think that someone could just switch it off if I'm a dissident, if I say the wrong thing, if I do the wrong thing, I could just be cut out. My lights, my cooker could be cut out because I said the wrong thing. I'm a quote suspect of some type of issue. But that's even nonsense. He doesn't have a battery. It's not going to work for scale. It really won't. They don't have an alternative. They're not planning for an alternative. That's part of the problem. Most of the people that are implementing this think there's an alternative coming. Those that are actually in control of this know that there's no alternative. It's not the point. It's actually just about destroying our independence. That's why it even says on the World Economic Forum website right there, weaponizing interdependence. The purpose is to make us dependent. That's what it's all for, in their own words. We look at this Natural Resource Committee. This is on the Board of Supervisors. So this includes your county. This is the state, Sonora. But this is across all of California. It says right there, codified into the statute midterm 2030 target, 40% reduction below 1990 levels by 2030. So that's about a half cut, 50%. They don't say anything about in here that there must be some type of alternative. They keep selling an alternative. But one thing is for sure, the cut in energy is right there in the law. That part's for sure. So until they can absolutely prove scientifically that there is some scalable alternative to you guys in the county, press them on it. Say, before we allow this to pass, I want to see scientific evidence of a scaling ability of free energy, and a free energy that scales, like a clean energy that scales. Until you can prove to us that you can replace that 50% reduction with an energy that is clean, that can scale, there's absolutely no way this should be allowed to go through. And even at that point, even if they did have that, it's not their decision to make. So you should put it to the individuals in a petition or a vote. Right now, they're violating the Fourth Amendment of privacy. They're violating the Fifth Amendment of private property, and they're violating the 10th Amendment of the states and individuals being able to make a decision like this. So there's a lot of violation going on here. Needless to say, they don't have an alternative. The purpose is to make us dependent. That is always important to understand, and it's in their own words. So when we come down to this, I do want to mention this part too. This part's really important. Is it even truly a threat? I mean, they keep saying it's settled, right? I often do hear that the science is settled. Well, I've looked a lot of the science, and all of this is taken from scientific papers or professors, various climatologists, etc. Carbon dioxide currently makes up about 0.1% of the atmosphere. It's about 0.04 to 0.1%, right? So for example, this Professor Leslie Woodcock said it's 0.04. We have 0.117, so about 0.04 to 0.17. So 90% of the atmosphere is water vapor. At 400 parts per million, it's lower than the 2000 parts per million. Many scientists say is actually sustainable and healthy, meaning that we're like at 10% of what we could actually sustain. And we're actually at 10% of what we have had in the past. We've been as high as 4,000 parts per million in the past. At about 150 parts per million, plant life could cease to exist, could die. Water is a more powerful greenhouse gas, 20 times higher than CO2. And of course, when it comes to the agricultural aspect, high cholesterol is almost exclusively from meat and dairy. The brain is 60% fat, meaning if we're going to cut our meat consumption in half,
right,
then we're cutting the brain fat in half, which is what travels through the synapses. This brain fat, this high cholesterol, is what makes cognitive function work. Mm-hmm. So these are all really, really important things. One final point on the science, and you're welcome to reiterate this to them.
Sure.
Climate science is called weak under determination. And again, in the scientific process that we do, it basically means that CO2 is rising and heat is rising if we look at it on a graph. But there's nothing to say that the CO2 is causing the heat any more than the heat is causing the CO2. You see, if I wear a mask and I breathe, the heat is causing a buildup of carbon dioxide, right? So the carbon dioxide is causing the heat.
That's a great example.
Or the heat is causing the carbon dioxide. So if we look at the atmosphere and we look at the carbon dioxide that is coming out here, it's actually coming from the heat and not vice versa, meaning that this entire thing is based on what we would call weak under determination. We don't know which is coming first. And anyone who tells you is lying. So pretty much that's where we're at. I want to finish up here by saying this. This is what they want. This is from the United Nations Biodiversity Assessment Report. This is from them. And in this, they have mapped out the biosphere, what they call protecting biodiversity. In this map, we can see red, which is no human use, yellow, which is little human use, highly regulated use. And in those tiny bits of green, tiny specks of green here, that's where we can have normal use, like city normal use. So basically what they're saying here is anyone in the red is going to have to be moved to the yellow, and anyone who lives in the yellow is going to have to be highly regulated to protect the red and to protect the earth from climate change. Total control in a way that Stalin or Hitler or Mao could never possibly dream of. And a total control that people are willingly buying and selling to everybody else. This is the most important issue of your lifetime. If this isn't fixed, your children and your grandchildren will suffer in a way that we could never possibly imagine. So this has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed by us, and it has to be fixed now. We don't have long, right? This is going to be continue to go through up until 2030. By that point, we'll be past the point of no return. So it has to be done now.
Yeah, and so the carbon dioxide, is a basic compound of life. Yep. We exhale carbon dioxide, animals do, plants need it in order to grow. And as far as the emissions here in California, I have found many studies and articles talking about that actually wildfires contribute more carbon dioxide than all the cars combined, all the vehicles combined. Mm-hmm. So there's one problem they should probably start working on, and that would be forest management, thinning out our forests that have been neglected for over 10 years now. So,
right.
a side note.
Yeah, and you know, another aspect to this, which I do want to mention, I don't often say this enough, but I'm actually pro-environmentalism, right? Like I do care about the environment.
Yeah.
I do want to protect the trees from deforestation. I do want to protect the soil from toxification and the oceans from toxification. I care about all those things, and we would be more than happy to help and work with people on those things. The problem, though, is that what they're offering is not that. Right? What they're offering is not that. What they're offering here isn't even focused on things like deforestation or fires. It's focused on the control of carbon dioxide.
Right.
And the reason,
burning on us.
yeah, and the reason that they focus on that is because that's where the control is, right? If it was actually about preserving the environment, there wouldn't be any way to micromanage and control everybody. But as we can see right here, and I'm going to finish on this point, what Agenda 21 2030 document actually shows, all the 2030 stuff, including what you guys are being met with climate action. By the way, climate action are just an NGO that work across all of America, but they're a subsidiary organization of the rest of the organizations, meaning UCLG and ICLEI come before climate action. Climate action basically just localize what ICLEI and UCLG tell them to from the global plan, right? So basically it's all one plan. That's why it's very important to understand this, because what will otherwise happen is we'll get lost in the weeds, and climate action will be trying to make it all about local wood burners. But as we just went through, it's not actually about any of those things at all. We have to remember the premise of what it's all about, and that's carbon dioxide, right? Because the wood burner is just one aspect. The farming is just one aspect. They're trying to cut the carbon dioxide. So if we attack it at the premise, the whole thing can stop, right? We can stop the whole thing from working. We might save ourselves the wood burners, but then they're just going to cut something else over here. So we have to go for the premise. So the reason they go after the carbon and dioxide is because this is what carbon dioxide produces. It's manufacturing, agriculture, construction, automotive, truck driving, taxis, airlines, oil and fuel transportation, and at least 1/3 of all homes and businesses in this country. So essentially what we're looking at is a wiping out of at least half of all of those industries. And then of course, you'll bring in the tech, the automotive, which don't produce it. Google's carbon neutral. So Google can take the monopoly on all the business. BlackRock can claim carbon neutral, so they can take the monopoly on all the business. But while the working class and the middle class have to work on industries that are carbon dioxide producing, right? So it's a monopoly. It's all a game. And it's all about monopoly of all the resources and the control of all the industries. But that's the important thing to understand is all 2030 legislation, the climate action guys working in your county are ultimately just trying to get this carbon neutral stuff through. And obviously we just looked at that in the county document. That's what it's about. Half the emissions by 2030, carbon neutral by 2050. So in this case, we always have to attack the carbon dioxide, carbon neutral thing, because that's the core. If you guys can get rid of the carbon neutral thing, all the other stuff is going to go with it. But if we chop off just one branch here or there, it's just going to keep growing back branches. That's why you have to go for carbon neutral, as that will get rid of everything else that you're worried about. And indeed, on a bigger scale, will save you guys from going into a totalitarian project in a very, very serious way. And if every county that we're working with, and I've been working with senators and stuff across the country, if we can all achieve this, then we're in a situation that have achieved freedom, true freedom, in a way that hasn't been achieved since things like the fall of the Soviet Union. So I just want to reiterate how serious this is. I will finish actually with one final point, which is in the state of Montana, we just got through, I've been working there as the test case. Montana is sort of the petri dish that we've been working on to try to replicate what we're doing. And then we want to kind of scale it across the country. And in the state of Montana, we have seen some pretty huge wins. One of those being sort of a constriction on the power of these people through whether it's through the injections, whether it's through the energy control. But the state government, the Republican Party state government of Montana have now just made it their official state policy to be against global governance, the World Economic Forum, United Nations in pursuit of any of these goals.
Yes.
So I want to show that to say that it is possible, that we are actually doing it. And if we can do what we're doing in Montana across the rest of the country, we will be free from this type of tyranny.
Yes, that's just let the government stay out of our way, out of our business. Let us just live our lives. And
Right.
most importantly, people just really need to hold these politicians accountable. I just wanted to quickly share something from the action plan that they are saying that is a state mandate. The first state mandate that California's had. Tuolumne County's first ever state mandated climate action plan. During one of the meetings, there was a guy from an environmental organization said that, you know, it's already being passed. We have no choice. The supervisors have to vote for this. And I just want to point out even in their website on these frequently asked questions, if you go to the very last paragraph here, they say, if the programs in the CIP are not implemented or completed, there are no local consequences. So there are no local consequences. They're even telling you that. So I just want to urge everyone to join the effort against this tyranny and really hold your state, of course, governor, your county accountable, your supervisors, your city councils, your mayor on all these topics, so that to stop this from happening, because it's going to change our lives and destroy our way of life for sure. So
yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to add, Mark? And I'm very grateful that you were able to join me today and be able to discuss these. And we're hoping that the supervisors can listen to the people and really do their own research. It sounds to me like a lot of them might not know exactly what's going on with these. They're just kind of going along with the pressure they're getting from the state and environmentalists.
Yeah, most of them don't know. This is the issue we ran into with Montana as the test case. Even the America First conservatives who absolutely are on our side were skeptical of my claims in the beginning before I showed them what I just showed you, because they were like, but isn't it just about like solar panels, right? Like, do we really want to attack people that just, but I was like, that's not what it's about at all. But most of them think it is. Most of them think that this is about like solar panel energy and windmills and stuff. No, it's about destroying 50%, in their own words, of all of our industries. So they don't know that. They think there's going to be some replacement. They think that there's going to be some way to fix it. And they're just going along with what they think is a good thing. I will say it's good to always approach them amicably first. We always want to go in with, you know, the good intentions. Be like, they probably just don't know what they're doing, which most of them don't. In which case, we need to show them the evidence and ask them to give us evidence. This is the critical thing. Just keep asking, and they need to do this. Otherwise, they can have a redress and they can be put out of their job. Show us the evidence of where the replacement of energy is going to come from. Show us how you're going to be able to allow me as an individual who has rights to shower every day, because you're cutting it in half. So just show me how you're going to replace the energy. Show me how you're going to replace the cows who produce carbon dioxide so we still have to eat meat. Just ask and press for the evidence. Write them a letter and say, you need to give us the evidence. And if you can't give us the evidence, then we're going to have to put through a petition to injunction, a legal injunction block on this, because you're breaking the constitutional rights of the people.
Thank you, Mark, for joining me. And I hope we can have another conversation about this and an update later on.
You're welcome. Best of luck, guys.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.